But our guest today is Steve Simeone, everybody. Steve.
Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you?
We got play on music. This is awesome.
Okay, there we go.
JD, by the way. Shout out to our buddy JD Shapiro.
Oh, I love it. He came on. He was supposed to come on one episode, and he ended up doing about 5 in a row because he just had so many stories.
Yeah, he's worked with legends. Yeah. He had coffee in George Lucas's kitchen. He was best friends with Stan Lee. It's like, who are you, dude? Mel Brooks made his first movie. Yeah. And he's a normal dude from Jersey. That's why I love him. Dude, I miss him. Now he lives in Spain, right?
Yeah, he's in Spain. He's kicking ass. He just did a new short film that I got a chance to watch, and it's winning awards everywhere. The guy's really he's kicking ass, but he says he misses us, so that just goes to show you. We all think, oh my God, I'd do anything to be there. He wants to come back and just do stand up.
I get it.
Yeah. So Steve, you're originally from Philly. Which part?
I'm not from the city. I'm from a beautiful place called Delaware County, Pennsylvania.
Delco.
It's so funny that I left Delco 20 years ago to head to LA. And now, since I left Philly, it's like everybody knows exactly what that means. Everybody in that region knows what Delco means. And for people that don't, it's kind of like where people work jobs that they hate to support people they love. That's how I always describe it. It's kind of like a Springsteen song without the guitars. It's just like let's just go to Wawa and get a coffee. That's Delco.
Well, I like that Delco stuck with that because where I'm from in Youngstown, Ohio, is like a Springsteen song. But I go back to visit my parents now; it's just Guy Fieri and Kid Rock.
Are they from there? Oh, that's
no, but it's just white trash.
Youngstown, isn't that Dean Martin's area?
Yeah.
Stomping grounds.
Yeah.
Have you ever hung out with Tony Hinchcliffe? I think that's his.
He's from there as well.
What a small.
Never hung out with him. The two guys that I know from Youngstown that are, I actually got to hang out with was Boom Boom Mancini, who boxed.
Really, Boom Boom Mancini?
Yeah.
Legend, God bless.
And then Mike Vecchione. I don't know if you ever got to work with Mike, but I love him.
With Ari Shaffir. What a nice guy.
Yeah.
Cool, dude. Why is there so many funny people from Youngstown?
Because they'll do anything to get out of there.
Gotcha.
Oh man! So you grew up in Delco, and what was your path? What was as a kid? Because you have so many great stories of your childhood from that you tell on stage. You have brothers, and you're growing up in this family. What got you? What were you into, and then how did you get into comedy?
I think I was always into comedy, that was different families are there was a family in our neighborhood. They were the sports kids. And then there's the smart kids. We were just always the funny. My dad loves to laugh. And, my earliest memories were I grew up in the perfect pocket for comedy. And I honestly can remember my parents dropping me off at my grandmother's house when I was a baby so they could go see Richard Pryor at the Latin Casino.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, my dad loves comedy. I remember one of his prized possessions that he'll tell the story to this day about when he met Henny Youngman in a bathroom.
Oh, wow.
Henny Youngman's business card was a picture of these two cleaning products, Pride and Joy. And he said when he met Henny Youngman, he said, "Hey, take my Pride and Joy." And my dad was like, "This is the greatest thing ever." And one of my dad's biggest regrets, I'm sure he's got plenty, but what he talks about is Henny Youngman said if you ever want him to do a gig, he would come by the house. And that was a real thing. Those old school comics, I think back in the 70s for $50, you could have had Henny Youngman show up and just say, "Take my wife, please." And then that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. My dad called the number on the card. He thought it would be a voicemail or something. And he actually talked to Youngman's wife.
Wow.
So
that is awesome.
Yeah, I grew up in a comedy house. So, and I grew up in, the 1980s were just such a wonderful time for not just stand-up comedy and the explosion of stand-up, but like cinematic comedy. Like,
yeah, so many good movies.
So many good movies. I don't know how to do it anymore. Saturday Night Live was great. Sketch comedy, comedic film, sitcom, stand-up. It was a glorious, glorious time to be alive.
Yeah, I find it interesting that now comedies, they don't have just regular comedies. Like, you remember going to a video store and there was like comedies about everything, and they weren't necessarily like movies that came out to be blockbusters. Like, they came out just to be the funny movie in the theater that week.
Yeah,
and
they don't do that anymore.
They don't do it now. It's like you have to have the biggest names. You have to have $10 billion budget. It's got to be over the top. There's got to be a humongous revelation that happens in the thing. And like before, I feel like when we were growing up, it was just like, oh no, this is a comedy about guys who work in a car factory. Here's a comedy about guys who eat popcorn.
Yeah, like Gung Ho was great.
Yeah. Great. Oh my God, dude. Thinking the
car factory. So funny. Michael Keaton, that guy, what a powerhouse.
Yeah,
but I think that's coming full circle again, because now it's because we're used to the mediums we were used to, and that's where the big blockbusters are released. But now it's all streaming, so all these regular comedies that are hitting them are coming across on like Amazon Prime or Netflix or this or that, and the youth is able to see so much more.
We're in a golden era of mini series that aren't necessarily real events. Like, there's a lot of good mini series shows. Like right now, that show Hacks that's on HBO. It's like basically like a Joan Rivers type comedy, hires like a young hipster to help work on her act. And it's pretty good. Like there's a lot of these like mini series shows that are pretty good, but
storytelling's changed for sure. For sure. Like with the advent of streaming, like why tell a 2-hour movie when if you like the characters and you can put them in cool situations, tell it over 10, 12 hours and then the opposite of that too. Like I think a lot of kids, instead of going to comedy movies or watching sketch comedy, it's TikTok.
Yeah.
It's
really sad, the attention span.
Yeah.
What kind
Andy, but
yeah, what can I consume in 30 seconds?
Yeah. And so you're doing, you're being funny in town, you're doing your thing growing up. It's the 80s. You start to get to high school. What's making you think about doing stand-up for real? Or do you just move straight out to LA?
I never thought I could do it for real. But once I did, my goal as a stand-up comic wasn't like a Netflix special or a sitcom. I defined success that if I could say something that was funny enough that a fat 12-year-old could repeat it at the lunch table and get to sit down with the cool kids, that's it. Because that's really when comedy started to matter to me. That's when I realized that it could be used to make friends, was middle school. Because that's when, like, I remember discovering Blanche Not, like, truly tasteless joke books, repeating stuff I saw on HBO or in movies that my parents were cool enough to let us watch that maybe some of the other kids weren't allowed to watch. And comedy became a way for me to connect with people. And it was the greatest. And then seeing comedy live, I thought you had to be born special to do it. But I've been blessed beyond belief. Like the first comedians that I saw live, first one I ever saw live was Dom Irrera, the legendary Mr. Dom Irrera at the Funny Bone on South Street in Philadelphia. And then I became friends with him. And then the next guy I saw live was Andrew Dice Clay at the Philadelphia Spectrum. My seats were so far away from the stage that I literally could touch the rafters. Like I think I was sitting behind like a Flyer Stanley Cup pennant. Like that's how far I literally could touch the rafters. And then Dice became my buddy. And then I saw John Panette. One night I went, okay, if I could ever do this, this would be the coolest thing ever. For my 21st birthday, I saw Frank Sinatra at the Sands in Atlantic City. And his opening act was John Panette. And then after the show, I got to meet the late, great John Panette. And I got to work with him too. So I've been beyond belief. All those people that influenced me as a teenager, I got to become friends with.
That's awesome.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah.
What brought you to LA? Like, did you just pick up and move? Just That's the same. I was 17, graduated high school, said I'm going to New York. Can't be here anymore.
It was desperation. Like, I remember I had a buddy in Philly that I ran into about 10 years after the move. And he was like, Stevie, I think about you. And it was somebody like, I worked with. I didn't think, and he was like, I think about you from time to time that you just had the balls to do it. And I don't know to this day if it was because you had a little brain or big balls, but either way you did it. And I was like, Butchie, it was a little of both. Like, I had no idea how difficult it was going to be. It's like getting punched in the face. So you're like, okay, I'm going to say this and I'm going to get punched in the face and I'm going to deal with it. But then when you get punched in the face, you're like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Like that's what moving to LA was like for me. I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't know how bad it was going to be. And I think for me personally, I had to try everything else before I did comedy because I knew it was going to be bad. But I was 28 when I started. I drove out to LA when I was like 27 because there was nothing else for me to do. It was either just be completely miserable or give it a shot. And
what were some of those things that you went through before you got there? Like, where were your final jobs before you were like, all right, that's it?
Oh, well, see, that's why the punch in the face thing's so important because I thought it would get better. Like, I thought the struggle would be difficult, but I thought LA would be better. Okay, like I graduated from college. I was a good student. I didn't think you were allowed to do comedy. Like, my parents were very supportive. They were like, do whatever you want. And that's how I grew up. Do whatever you want. We just want you to be happy. Do what you want. But that culture that told me that the day I got my college diploma, everybody was like, oh, you got to get a job. And I'm like, but a month ago, you told me I could be whatever I wanted to be. And now you're telling me just get a job. And like, that was kind of like it. Like, it was like, just go to work. Like, what are you talking? This is what life is. Just go to work. And I was like, I'm miserable now. I had that first generation quarter life crisis. Like at 21, 22, I'm like, this all sucks. If it doesn't going to get better, I don't know what I'm going to do. I got lied to right out of college, took a bad job, quit that within a couple months. I did like 3 open mics and I'm like, this is what I want to do. But it was like the late 90s. Comedy was dead. Then I worked in corporate America for a couple years and that was terrible. Like I collected delinquent credit card accounts.
Oh shit. That does not sound like a fun job for somebody who likes to make people laugh.
Oh, but then it gets better. Then these idiots, they partnered up with an auto insurance company. And what they wanted, this is what my job was. When you got your credit card statement in the mail, there was also a scratch off ticket. And it said, scratch off these numbers, maybe you want a brand new BMW. And then I'm the idiot that takes the phone call and I go, before I check those numbers, we just want you to know we're launching a new auto insurance product. And would you be interested in getting a no strings attached quote? And then the only people that were selling the auto insurance were lying to people. They were just like, they would just cancel their auto insurance without them knowing, saying they accepted the quote.
Wow.
Brutal. So then after that, I was like, this sucks. I thought maybe I would go to law school because I thought that would be a job my parents would be proud of. And I took one of those law school prep courses. It was called the Kaplan Review. And they guaranteed you, it cost like $1,000 in the 90s. And they guaranteed you a 10-point jump on your scores. I got the 10-point jump, but it went in reverse. Yeah, honestly. So I'm like, all right, I guess I'm not going to law school. And then I was really angry and desperate. And I knew I wanted to do comedy, but I didn't know how to do comedy. And then it was like a scene in a movie. Like my mom was giving me a pep talk because after I quit the corporate job, I moved back in with my parents. And I was telling my mom how all the jobs sucked. And there was a free paper. It was called the City Paper. And that was like before the internet took over, it was like everything cool in your region for that week. Whether it was a comedian, a band, an art exhibit, it was everything cool. It was like paper social media.
Yeah.
I would go through the one ads in there because I didn't know anybody. My parents are teachers. And that was like where my anger started to really surface with how the world worked. Because my parents are like lovely, beautiful, kind, compassionate Catholic people that raised me for a world that didn't exist, you know?
Yeah.
And all these douchebags are getting jobs because their dads are corrupt senators. That's how the world works, you know?
Yeah.
I remember going through the newspaper with my mom. I'm like, there's no jobs in here that aren't any fun. I'm like, look at this one. Philadelphia Eagles Entertainment Division seeks intern. And I'm like, what is that? And I didn't think it was the football team. I thought maybe it was like some scam, shady direct video company like the
This is what you've been through.
Yeah. And I called and I wound up getting an internship with the Philadelphia Eagles cheerleaders and mascot. And it was the greatest. I mean, I wasn't making any money, but I was allowed to park my car at Veterans Stadium for free and hang out and drink free. They had free snacks and coffee there. So I hung out every day until they started to pay me. And I did that job for a while. And like, what a great organization. Like Mr. Laurie down at the Eagles. There are still people I worked with 25 years ago, 20 years ago that still work for the Eagles. And I think that says a lot about ownership. That was awesome. That gave me the confidence to live dreams, which was already knocked out of me by the time I was 22. To like no fault of my parents or no fault of my friends, but life will kick your ass. I even had friends that when I was 20, graduated from college, they're like, you should go to LA, you should go for it. What do you have to lose? Then by the time I was 25, I had friends tell me, they were like, what are you, nuts? This is what it is. Just go get a job.
Well, was your father all right? So my parents were very similar. Like my father always said to me, just do what makes you happy. Do what makes you happy, right? And I would be like, okay. But my dad was a sanitation worker. My mother, they're both very like, this is the way the world works. So I went that route. I just started doing what made me happy. I started playing music and getting paid a lot of money and doing real well. But my father still can't wrap his head around it. So he's like I'll tell him I'm doing a podcast. He's like, how much you make for that? What do they pay you for that? I'm like, that's not how it works. You got to do all this.
My parents are so supportive. I think not that my dad was miserable 100% of the time, but when I saw doing what you didn't want to do, the effect that has on you. And I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so my parents, everybody's really supportive. The only challenge I have is like with the woman that I'm dating, she doesn't understand where free time begins and work ends. To an outsider, it looks like I'm not working, but I'm like,
100%.
I'm working right now. Like I can't give you attention right now because I'm in the green room at the comedy club and I have to make sure that staff is taken care of, that the opening act's not making me look like an idiot, that I go check in with the manager of the club to make sure that if he needs me to do anything, I go, this is work. We're on the road, but this is all work. I know it sounds like I am on the phone with my friend. It's 100% my friend. But guess what? What we're talking about will lead to money for us. Yep. Maybe not in a week, but 3 years from now it might. It's all work.
Yeah, it's that thing that it looks like show fun, but it's actually show business.
Yes.
You know, my girlfriend actually just came down. I did a show down in Margate with my original music trio this past weekend. Cool. And my girlfriend came down with me for the first time. She's seen me do, a couple of things. She actually met me as a person and didn't know me as an entertainer, which is awesome. But she came down and she brought her daughter with her, and she realized okay, we're there at 11 a.m. for a 12 o'clock sound check, for a 2 o'clock downbeat for the show, and we're not leaving until 6 because I've got to wrap up all the cables and the sound equipment and all that. She goes, wow, this is a lot more than just that hour show I thought you did. You don't just walk up on stage and tell your ha-ha stories and sing your high notes.
Right.
Let's also not forget the amount of years of training, learning the songs. People think that this is easy, and especially when I get writing work, they're like, yeah, you just sit down, you probably knock this out in a day. It's I don't know if you know how this works. Remember doing homework? It was hard.
Larry Kasdan's quote on screenwriting, it's like having homework every night for the rest of your life. True.
Dead on.
And then the other thing is, to your point, Mark, I don't think people realize the amount of dues it takes. And I'm grateful for it, man, because it could either make you better or bitter. And somehow, through the grace of God, I became a more compassionate person because I got my ass kicked so much.
Yeah.
I understand it when they're not compassionate. I understand it. I know a very successful comedian that would like brag about getting paid in cash and being mean to clubs and theaters because of the way he was treated on the way up, and the frustrations of just hearing no for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Like, I worked 2 jobs in LA, minimum 2 day jobs in LA for about 10, 11 years, nonstop, in addition to acting class, in addition to writing, in addition to stand-up, in addition to going, oh, I can't come into work tomorrow because this comedian's going to let me do a gig with them 5 hours away. Like,
yeah,
it was brutal. Like, I was talking to my girlfriend's dad, and he's so cool because he's like a blue-collar dude, and he loves the fact that I get paid to do this. But I don't think I could go through the process again. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like to be just being poor. Like, even if you're not working your balls off, which I was.
Yeah.
But just being poor for 10 years like, poverty leaves scars, man. Like,
yeah,
it's weird.
Oh, yeah.
I remember, like, for many years, I always had a job in a pizza place because I knew I could eat. You know, I knew there was food there. And I can remember, like, going to the grocery store and having like $8 to spend on my groceries. Like, horrible.
No, I did still to this day. I'm going to New York as soon as we're done with this podcast. I have to go to New York for a audition, and I'm immediately, when I started to look up how to get there, I'm trying to figure out how to cut costs on the travel. Can I avoid the toll roads? Will I be able to make it in time? If I take the train in from Secaucus, will that be cheaper than if I just drive in and park next to where the audition is? Because I'm just so conditioned to being broke, because I spent my 20s and most of my 30s broke, just scraping by, taking every gig I can, saying yes to everything because it was an opportunity to move forward.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge distinction a lot of young comics or young people in any profession you have to think about. It's not just what you're going to get paid for that gig. It's the opportunity to move forward. I love how you phrase that.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah, because that's I was just going to say that's a chance that either you don't know who you're going to be performing in front of, or it's an opportunity for you to hone your craft in front of someone. So it's a win-win either way, as long as you're up there and in front of people.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it's a losing. That is falling out of society for some reason, right? So with my business, I have a lot of younger guys that work with me, and first of all, I'm way older, and I still don't. I'm a yes man. My wife is always like, "You're a yes man. You say yes to everything." I'm like, "Yeah, because you never know what that yes leads to. Who cares? What's the worst that could happen? I have an experience where I learned something." But these kids are like, I don't know if it's worth my quality time. I'm like, well, you're 20 years old and you're worried about the quality of your life of the 5 hours that you're going to get paid? I was like, get at it. And I'm not asking them to dig ditches. Our lives are performing and hanging out with people, and it's a good time.
Yeah.
But
to your point, bro, I think we're in serious trouble. Like, I don't care what your political beliefs are. This country's in trouble. Like, I talked to a guy in a furniture store, just making small talk, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we just started to talk, and he was a contractor. He knows how to. Because I'm so fascinated by people with real man skills. Like, I love going on the YouTube and get myself in trouble. Like, I'm gonna have to call somebody that knows what they're doing. I love it though. Like, it's something in my like Guinea Irish DNA of like, no, let's go to work. And I'm terrible. Like, in wood shop, I made a cutting board for 9 months. Like, I just don't. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't have them. And I'm so fascinated by people. Like, if I'm talking to this guy, and I'm like, I wish I knew how to do all that carpentry stuff, because this guy could do everything. And then the other guy comes over, and we start talking. They're all about my age. And he goes, Steve, the problem was I would bid on jobs, and I couldn't find anybody to help me.
Yeah.
It was like nobody wanted to show up and work. And he goes, I was paying them good money, but it wasn't enough.
But it's never enough, because they value that. They're like, my time, my me time is too important to make $300 for the day. I'm like, what?
Because they're trying to pretend
Let's do it.
They're trying to pretend they're 50 to 70-year-olds, where they actually have quality time because they put the work in. So now they can yes and no gigs. But when you're first starting, you have to just yes it, because you'll never learn how to do what you're doing. You'll never get into, it's the 10,000. You want to be a master of whatever you do. Like, you got to put in the hours. And these people don't want to put in the hours, but they want to still feel as if they're the master of their craft. And it's kind of sad what's going on. And, but I think it's also a generational thing where, like, I just watched, I can't think of the name of the movie, On the Flight Home. But it's like the dad was like lucky to have a job. He was lucky to have gotten, a house. He was lucky to have, the kid grew up in the house and thought, dad's a sucker. He's working for the man. And I want something bigger. And it's like, and he was like shitting on his dad. Meanwhile, it's like, dad could have been homeless and not done anything, or not, been free or whatever. And so this kid's kind of like a dickhead, like, you're supposed to be rooting for him because he's trying to better himself. But at the same time, you're like, what a dickhead. Like, your dad, you have to look at like the people that paved the road you're walking on. And I don't think enough people do that.
Amen. I think you're absolutely right. And when did having a job, when did that become like something to be embarrassed about? Do you know what I mean? In LA, there was almost like this culture, like, oh, you have to go to work tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, dick. My like, I worked a graveyard shift at a gym. I did telemarketing. I did PA work. I did craft services. Anything where I could get a job. Another $50, I'll do it. I worked every job at the Comedy Store, everything. But there's almost like this mentality where people, they don't want to earn it.
Well, we were just talking about it a little bit ago about TikTok and YouTube, and even what we're doing. If you do that 1 30-second video that's going to get you famous for the next 5 months, and you're going to get the however many million followers, and you're going to get the branding and the advertising and all this, and the sponsorship and so on and so forth. That's what everyone. I cannot tell you, when I was teaching, I taught as an assistant band director for 4 years.
Wow. How old were the kids?
5th grade through 12th grade.
Oh my gosh, you're a saint. You're going straight. Oh my God. God bless you. That's amazing.
in Philly, 16th and Vine, brother. Okay. Center City, Philadelphia. Are you fucking kidding me? Anyway, so I taught, and I cannot tell you, whenever we would ask, especially the younger kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a YouTube star. Yeah. I want to be TikTok famous. And be like, how about a plan B?
Yeah.
It's like, that's
the theme of everything we're talking about right now, and we're talking about the younger generation or the young person in the scenario. None of them ever want to be a master of their craft. None of them say, I want to be the best writer I can be. I want to be the best comedian I can be. They just go, I want to be famous. We live in an instant society. We live in a fast food society. We think it's overnight successes because we've been lied to. You hear all these stories. William Holden was found watching a theater. He came home from the war, and he was at a Broadway show when he was discovered. Yeah, he was also acting for like 15 years, struggling. And then he went to the military, and he met the guy who got him his first big job at the Broadway show. But nobody tells that story. They just overnight success. And that was back when, in the late 50s or 40s?
Yeah, like when I love mentoring young comics. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
It was such an intimidating process for me to go from somebody that is in the cubicle or on the job site, or somebody that's working in an environment where they're barely clicking off one box on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, I know that level of frustration. And like, being artists, we get that level of sensitivity. And like, I remember working with a guy named Buzzy in my first cubicle job. Buzzy had just gotten out of the Navy. He was the greatest guy ever. And he was thrilled. I remember him holding up his paycheck like out of a movie. He was like, would you look at this? And we got full Bennies too. Every 2 weeks. I'm on top of the world. And I was thinking about ways I could kill myself on the way home, because I knew I couldn't do that for another 40 years.
Yeah.
But we're different. We're all built different. And like, when I meet somebody that's built different, where they just can't do that normal thing, I'm like, how can I help? Okay. And I will say this, and this is not a knock, but over my 20 years in the Comedy Store, I can't think of anybody. I would explain the open mic system to the kids, the whole process. And I know things maybe did change the last couple of years when the Comedy Store was the hottest club in LA. But for a good 15 years, when I could get kids spots on the open mic, then it became impossible to, 10-year vets couldn't do an open mic there. But I would explain to people, you just have to hang out, show up every week. Just keep on showing up. That's it. Number one, just keep showing up.
Yep.
Nobody came more than 3 weeks in a row. Whereas for me, Pauly Shore walked me into that club. It was his mother's club. Pauly Shore walked me in, and it still took me 8 years. Wow. 8 years of showing up before I got paid to do comedy there.
Wow.
I show up every week for 8 years for nothing.
Yeah.
So it goes, I go, all right, man. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you it was easy.
Yeah. Everybody thinks there's a cheat code, and we're holding on to it because we make a living in entertainment. Give me the cheat code, man. Like, don't make me fight for it.
You know, here, I'll give you the cheat code, okay? And Thomas Edison said it better than anyone else. I mean, well, maybe the guy who first said it, and then Edison stole it. But what Edison's credited with saying.
So what did Tesla say?
So Tesla said that most people miss opportunity because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. That's it. You got to do the work. That's it. You got to get your hands dirty, and you got to do it. You got to show up. Like you said, Steve, you got to fucking show up. If you don't show up, guess what? While you're sitting down, the guy behind you can see what you were looking at.
And you know what I think?
Good.
I was going to say, I don't want, because I could easily sound like a cranky old man. I do not want that to, because I look at the lack of opportunity for a lot of these younger kids. And America used to work figuratively and literally. And it doesn't work in either sense of that definition. It just doesn't work anymore. Like, you have these, like customer service. Like, you go to call a company and there's no customer service. Like, the few companies I choose to do business, like my Bank of America's got great customer service. And that's like why, because you can call and talk to a person. But so few of these companies, like, you go to talk to somebody, it's frustrating, you got to do it yourself, and you get disconnected, and they were like, we'll call you back, and they never call you back, and you can't figure anything out. Nothing works anymore. They've cut corners in this country so much that, like, so the people at the top can make an extra 30 million this year. Meanwhile, the person down on the front lines doesn't have any backup. They're in a firefight trying to take care of customers. So I don't blame them for going, you know what, forget it. I'm out. Let me go get my 600 UBI. I get it, because the opportunities aren't there.
Yeah. And everybody's too good to do the job they're hired for. You know, and the comedy club's a perfect example. Every MC should be featuring. Every feature wants to be a headliner. Every headliner wants to have a TV show. Every guy who has a TV show that comes back to comedy just wants to be a funny comic again. Nobody's okay with where they are. Everybody wants to be somewhere else.
I'm very happy to be a host. Just throwing that out there. An MC, I'm very happy to be hosting. Just keep me fucking working, you know. Especially because I'm not a fucking comedian. Just just put me up there. I'll tell my occasional ha-ha story.
That's
you know.
where I'm with my whole career. Like, well, I'm a middle class comedian. What a blessing this is. Like, now that I live in normal people, Florida. Like, I don't live in Miami. I don't live at the beach. Like, I'm with normal people. And when they ask me what I do for a living, like, I'm embarrassed to tell them. And I'm also so grateful.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that, like, I see all my neighbors wake up at 6 a.m. to go to work. And I'm like, going back to bed, you know, like, I can check and I'm like, this is a blessing. Like, I'm just so grateful for what I have.
Yeah.
Agreed. The world needs more buzzies too. Like, we need those buzzies to be happy, like grinding that out and doing what they got to do.
I think I'm like a comedian buzzy. I'm like, this is great. I have 2 weekends of work this month, a little money coming in here, a little money coming. That's all I need. I don't want to be famous. Ugh.
A giant breakthrough I had was when I realized doing the work part of it is what makes me happy.
Amen.
You put me on and working on a project or working on a bit or whatever, it makes me just as happy as the performing.
you don't even care about the paycheck. Like I remember when I started to get to the point where I could do stand-up comedy, opening up for friends. Not with like people that are mentors, but legitimate peers, friends,
buddies. Yeah.
I was walking out of the club without picking up my check. They're like, Steve, did you forget anything? I'm like, got my keys, got my phone. No, I think I'm good. Thanks so much. They're like, we got to pay you. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I started to work like in television where people pay for your lunch. I'm like, I get to laugh with buddies and we get free Chinese food. This is the greatest, like, it's like a rich kid's birthday party. You're like, whoa, you guys have a all? Like, it was the greatest. It's a blessing. It's all a blessing. It's so easy to lose focus of that. But, dude, I remember one of the best pieces of advice Andrew Dice Clay ever gave us when we were all door guys at the Comedy Store. It's like a Tuesday night, I would say the summer of 2002, July 2002. And it was probably about 12:30 in the morning. Comedy Store back then was dead. It was a ghost town. There was probably 5 customers in the room. We were all hanging out in the back. And I remember Dice saying, if you're not having fun now, get out. It was like
so dead on.
It was like, this is the whole reason to do it. It was like, it's a school night. You're out with your buddies. It's 1 a.m. You're laughing your balls off. Everybody else you know is back in bed, miserable, thinking about the terrible job they have to go to tomorrow to pay for the house they can't afford. He goes, if you're not enjoying this, get out now. He goes, this is the paycheck.
Yeah.
And he was right.
You know, it's funny. He's not a well-known comic, but the same situation. It was all the guys who were like, you know, just grinding it out and just getting the shittiest spots on the night or whatever. And he looked at us, and he was like a paid weekend guy. And he looked at us and just said, just remember, one day you're going to look back at this as those were the days. Because we were all like kind of miserable, even though we should have been appreciating every moment instead of, you know, bitching. And these were the salad days, kids.
It's cool.
I love how positive you are. I think you're a rare person in this business. Every night coming in when I worked with you in Tampa was like, I can't wait to see Steve, because he's going to have a big smile on his face. He's going to be talking about something fun. He's going to go on stage and have fun. I'm starting to not like or appreciate the guys who go up and are just the miserable, too good to be there.
I can't be around it. And the reason why it's so funny to me when I hear positive, and it's so fun when people say, "Oh, Steve's so positive," like my brothers are like, "You are not positive." Like it's people, but it's two different sides to the same coin. Like I'm positive because I know how miserable everything is. And right now, if we make this choice, like I'm in a backyard. I never thought in 20 years in LA I would ever have a backyard. I thought I would need a sitcom to go into syndication just to have a backyard in LA.
Yeah.
I moved to Florida and I'm like, oh, I don't have to make it. I could go scoop ice cream at Walmart and afford this house. This is awesome. About that. Like I get to fly to Philly tomorrow. I'm probably going to break even on the gig by the time I pay for my car and pay for my hotel and pay for a sandwich. But I get to see my brothers. I get to make people laugh. I get to go see who's at the show. And it's going to lead to another gig. And who knows? And I'm going to hang out with you, Mark, and we're going to have some laughs. And maybe we'll go down to Geno's and sit in the VIP seats. And maybe that's what we'll do in Christmas when we come back, because we'll be nice to everybody that we meet. And like, I've been around people that were freakishly talented and they had everything I thought I wanted and they were so miserable. And I went, well, that's not it. It's not supermodels and cocaine and fast cars because they want to kill themselves. And I'm like, then what's it really about? And dude, I got so miserable. I had a complete breakdown in my early 30s that I started going back to church. I'm like, I don't have any other options. People go, why are you so happy? And they go, if you tell me it's Jesus, and I go, all right, I'm just not going to tell you. And because they haven't gotten to that point yet. But when I am on the phone now, what COVID's done is I'm talking to friends of mine and they're so miserable that I get excited. I'm like, ooh, maybe they're ready for a breakthrough. I'm like, are you so miserable that you're ready to see the beauty in everything? And I think that's what it takes sometimes. You have to just keep on getting humbled. So you go, wait, I can't do this. It all does suck.
God, what a I got.
You keep on digging, and then you're like, whoa, there's something going here.
You gotta let me know if you guys are getting steaks tomorrow because I'm coming just so I can give you a hug, Steve. Jesus Christ, man, it's good to know that there's people like this in the industry though, because so often you run like you're saying, Mark, you run into people they're just miserable sad sacks, and you're just like, you get to do this.
And you know what's so
sad? To do this.
That somehow people said that was the cool thing. Like you're better for being miserable. I remember when I started to do comedy, everybody was so negative that the more you complained, the more people thought you were a genius. And I started to go, wait a second. If I keep this going, I'm going to blow my brains out. Like that's no genius in that. And I remember like at least my generation of comics, everybody went through their Bukowski phase. And they were like, oh, this guy's so miserable. He gets it. I'm like, no, this guy's an idiot. He's so miserable that he doesn't get it at all.
I remember being early 20s and realizing that.
I'm like, if the little things, a snapped shoelace will send you to the nut house. I'm like, what about surprise donuts? Will you walk into a room and you just walk in and there's fresh donuts and anybody could have one? It doesn't have to be your birthday. You don't even work at the office. And they're not like chain franchise donuts. They're for some Korean guy that only has one thumb, and it brings him joy to see them bubble perfectly before he pulls them out. And you know what I mean? And you're like, you can get seconds because everybody's in the office is because it's LA. And then they go, we've never seen anybody enjoy a donut like that before. And I'm like, yeah, because that's how miserable I've been.
Folks, there's nowhere to go from that. That was a perfect ending. Thank you for tuning in. Come and check us out Thursday. I will be opening for Steve at the Parks Casino. We'll be doing Joe Conklin's comedy show at the Parks Casino. It's going to be a lot of fun. Come out, stick around, have a drink. We'll hang out. We're going to have some laughs. And thanks for tuning in. And Steve, we're going to have you back on because this was just this is something I really needed. It was a shot of adrenaline that needed to get in me.
Me too. I feel like I made friends. I can't wait to hang out with you guys.
Same. I might have to come to Philly now to see the show.
Come on, have some laughs.
Come down.
Hey guys.
Have a great one. Night, guys.